The day she lost her job was the day the most powerful man in the city began searching for her. Olivia Carter never imagined that a simple walk home would become the beginning of a story nobody would believe. The evening air was cold as she stepped away from the hospital entrance, holding a small bag with her personal belongings. Her footsteps were slow, not because she was weak, but because she was carrying the weight of a day that had changed everything. For 8 years, Olivia had worn her nurse uniform with pride. She had cared for patients when their families could not be there. She had stayed late to comfort people who felt forgotten. She had remembered small details that others overlooked. But on that afternoon, none of those things seemed to matter. The hospital administration had made a decision, and Olivia was the person left standing alone. She was told that her position was no longer needed. She was told it was a business decision. But deep inside, Olivia knew there was more behind it. She had always chosen what was right for her patients, even when it was not the easiest choice. She had never been the loudest person in the room. She never demanded attention. She simply believed that caring for people was a responsibility, not just a job. As she walked down the quiet street toward her small apartment, Olivia looked back at the hospital one last time. The bright lights inside the building continued shining as if nothing had happened. People continued moving through the hallways. But for her, everything felt different. What nobody knew was that Olivia's name was already known by someone far more powerful than the people who had dismissed her. Across the city, Ethan Walker sat inside a private office high above the streets. To most people, he was known as a Korean Mafia boss, a man whose influence reached into many areas of the city. His reputation made people careful with their words around him. His decisions carried weight. But that evening, Ethan was not thinking about business or power. He was looking at a medical report and searching for one name. Olivia Carter. Months earlier, during a difficult moment in his family, a nurse had shown unusual compassion. She had treated someone important to him not as a powerful person, but as a human being who needed care. That nurse had been Olivia. Ethan never forgot kindness, especially when it came from someone who expected nothing in return. When he learned that Olivia was no longer working at the hospital, something felt wrong. He knew the kind of person she was. He knew she would never abandon someone who needed help. He knew there had to be another side to the story. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the hospital. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere. People recognized him. Conversations became quieter. But Ethan had only one question. He looked around the room and asked calmly, "Where is the nurse?" Nobody understood why a man with so much power was searching for someone they had just removed from their staff. Nobody knew the truth about Olivia Carter. They did not know that the woman walking home alone the night before was the same person a powerful man was determined to find. And they were about to discover that they had made a mistake they could never ignore. The hospital had never felt this quiet before. Not because the halls were empty, but because everyone was trying to understand why Ethan Walker, a man known for his influence and powerful position, had arrived asking for a nurse who was no longer there. The staff members exchanged uncertain looks. They knew Olivia Carter had been dismissed the previous day, but they did not understand why someone like Ethan cared. To them, Olivia had simply been a nurse. Someone who worked quietly, followed procedures, and rarely asked for recognition. They never realized that her greatest strength was exactly the reason people often overlooked her. She did not seek attention. She created change without needing anyone to notice. Ethan stood in the hospital lobby with a calm expression, waiting for an answer. He did not raise his voice. He did not create a scene. His presence alone was enough to make people pay attention. "I need to speak with Olivia Carter," he said. The administrator standing nearby carefully explained that Olivia was no longer employed there. Ethan listened without interruption, but his expression changed slightly. He remembered Olivia differently. He remembered a nurse who treated people with patience when others were too busy. He remembered someone who stayed beside a patient during a difficult night, offering comfort when there was nothing else she could do. She had never asked who the patient was. She had never cared about status or influence. She simply cared about the person in front of her. That was what made Ethan remember her. The hospital staff began sharing small details about Olivia. A receptionist mentioned how Olivia often helped new employees feel welcome. Another nurse explained that Olivia was always the first person to volunteer when someone needed support. Slowly, the image of Olivia Carter began changing in their minds. She was no longer the quiet nurse who walked through the halls unnoticed. She became the person who had carried kindness into a place where many people had become focused only on schedules and paperwork. Meanwhile, Olivia had arrived at her apartment. The small space was simple, but it reflected her personality. Everything was organized. Everything had a purpose. She placed her nursing badge on the table and sat quietly for a moment. She felt disappointed, but she refused to let one unfair decision define her. She reminded herself why she became a nurse in the first place. It was never for praise. It was never for a title. It was because she believed every person deserved compassion. Across the city, Ethan continued searching for answers. He asked why Olivia had been removed from her position. The explanation he received was unclear and incomplete. Something about the situation did not make sense. Ethan had built his life by noticing details others ignored. He knew when something was not right. But more importantly, he knew Olivia was not someone who would leave a patient behind or fail in her responsibility. The woman everyone had allowed to disappear quietly was the same woman Ethan remembered clearly. As he left the hospital, he made one decision. He would find Olivia himself. Not because she was connected to power. Not because she could benefit him. He wanted to find her because someone who gave so much kindness deserved to know that someone had finally noticed. And for the first time, the people who had overlooked Olivia began asking the same question Ethan had asked from the beginning: where was the nurse who mattered more than anyone realized? The morning after Ethan Walker left the hospital, Olivia Carter continued her life quietly, unaware of how many questions her absence had created. She woke up early, prepared a simple breakfast, and looked at the small nursing badge resting on her table. For a moment, memories returned. She remembered the first day she entered the hospital years earlier, nervous but determined to help people. She remembered every patient who needed encouragement, every family member who needed someone to listen, and every moment when a simple act of kindness mattered more than recognition. Olivia never believed that being a nurse was about receiving praise. To her, it was about showing up when people needed someone the most. That belief was exactly why she had always been different. While others focused on positions and appearances, Olivia focused on people. But her quiet nature often caused others to underestimate her. They saw someone who avoided attention and assumed she lacked confidence. They saw someone who rarely spoke about her achievements and assumed she had none. They never understood that Olivia's strength was never meant to be displayed. It was meant to be felt by the people whose lives she touched. Meanwhile, Ethan continued looking into what had happened at the hospital. The more he learned, the more confused he became. Every person he spoke with described Olivia in the same way: patient, reliable, and compassionate. Yet somehow, she had been the one removed from her position. Ethan sat in his office that afternoon, reviewing the information he had collected. He had spent years dealing with complicated situations, but this one felt different. It was not about business or reputation. It was about fairness. He remembered the first time he met Olivia. It was during a difficult moment when someone close to him needed medical care. Many people treated Ethan's family differently because of their influence, but Olivia did not. She did not become nervous because of his name. She did not try to gain anything from being near someone powerful. She simply did her job with the same compassion she gave everyone else. That moment stayed with him. Ethan had met many people who wanted something from him, but Olivia was one of the few who expected nothing. She saw a person before she saw a reputation. That was why he trusted her. Later that day, Ethan visited the hospital again and asked for a complete explanation. The staff became uncomfortable because they knew the decision against Olivia was not as simple as they had first claimed. They began revealing details they had ignored before. Olivia had questioned decisions when she believed patients were not being treated fairly. She had spoken respectfully but firmly when something did not feel right. She was not removed because she lacked skill. She was removed because she refused to stay silent. Ethan listened carefully. The truth was becoming clearer. Olivia had not lost her job because she failed. She had lost it because she chose her values over convenience. For the first time, Ethan understood that the woman everyone underestimated possessed a type of strength that even powerful people often lacked. As evening arrived, Ethan looked out at the city lights and made his decision. He would not simply find Olivia. He would make sure the truth about her was finally seen. Because some people spend their lives trying to prove their worth, but Olivia Carter had spent hers showing it without saying a word. The hospital had never felt more uncomfortable than it did that afternoon. The same halls where Olivia Carter had spent years caring for others now carried whispers about the decision that removed her. People who once walked past her without a second thought were beginning to realize they had never truly seen her. They remembered the nurse who always arrived early, the woman who stayed patient when others were overwhelmed, and the person who treated every patient with the same level of care regardless of their background. But understanding the truth did not erase the mistake that had already been made. Ethan Walker returned to the hospital with a calm determination. He was not there to create fear or demand special treatment. He was there because he believed every person deserved to be heard. As he walked through the entrance, employees quietly watched him. They expected anger because of his reputation, but what they saw was something different. Ethan carried himself with control and purpose. He simply wanted answers. The hospital administrator carefully explained the situation again, but Ethan noticed the hesitation in his words. There were missing details. There were unanswered questions. Ethan had spent years learning how to recognize when something did not add up. Tell me the complete story, he said calmly. Slowly, the truth began to appear. Olivia had not been removed because of poor performance. She had not failed her patients. She had not ignored her responsibilities. In fact, the opposite was true. The problem was that Olivia had always followed her conscience. She had raised concerns when she believed a patient needed more attention. She had respectfully questioned decisions when she felt something important was being overlooked. She never caused conflict. She never sought recognition. She simply believed that doing the right thing mattered. Some people admired that about her, but others found it inconvenient. Ethan listened carefully as each detail was revealed. The more he learned, the more respect he felt for Olivia. Many people around him had spent their lives trying to gain influence. They wanted others to notice them. They wanted their achievements displayed. Olivia had done the opposite. She had quietly created a difference without expecting anything in return. Meanwhile, Olivia sat at home unaware of the conversation happening across the city. She was already thinking about what came next. Losing her position was painful, but she refused to allow disappointment to change her character. She opened a notebook where she had written reminders from her years as a nurse. One sentence stood out: always remember the person behind the problem. It represented everything she believed. Ethan eventually learned about the circumstances that led to her dismissal, and one detail affected him more than anything else. Olivia had never spoken badly about the hospital after leaving. She had never blamed anyone publicly. She had simply accepted the situation with dignity and continued moving forward. That was when Ethan realized something important. Many people could appear strong when everything was going well. But Olivia showed true strength when she had every reason to feel defeated. As the sun disappeared behind the city skyline, Ethan made a quiet decision. He would find Olivia and speak with her directly. Not as a powerful man, not as someone offering a favor. He wanted to meet her as the person who had shown kindness when nobody was watching. Because sometimes the people the world pushes aside are the very people who reveal what humanity should look like. The next morning, Olivia Carter woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight entered through the small window of her apartment, creating a quiet and peaceful atmosphere. For many people, losing a job would mean losing confidence. But Olivia had always measured her life differently. She did not define herself by a position, a uniform, or a building where she worked. She defined herself by the people she helped and the values she carried every day. Still, she could not deny that leaving the hospital had left a painful emptiness. Nursing had been more than a career for her. It had been a promise she made to herself years ago. A promise to care for people when they felt the most vulnerable. Across the city, Ethan Walker continued searching for the truth behind Olivia's dismissal. But the more he discovered, the more he wanted to understand the person behind the name. He did not want to simply correct a mistake. He wanted to know why someone with such dedication had been allowed to walk away unnoticed. Ethan had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. They wanted opportunities, connections, or approval. Genuine kindness was rare in his world. That was why Olivia stayed in his memory. She had been one of the few people who treated him without seeing his reputation first. She saw a person before she saw power. Later that afternoon, Ethan found Olivia's address through the information he had gathered. For a moment, he stood outside her apartment building, thinking about what he would say. He was a man who could negotiate difficult situations and make important decisions without hesitation. Yet standing there, he realized this conversation mattered more than any business discussion he had ever had. When Olivia opened the door and saw Ethan standing there, surprise crossed her face. She knew who he was, but she did not understand why someone like him would come looking for her. "I wanted to speak with you," Ethan said calmly. Olivia invited him inside, still unsure of the reason for his visit. Ethan explained that he had learned about what happened at the hospital. He told her that he knew she had been treated unfairly. But Olivia did not respond with anger. She simply listened. "I appreciate that you came," she said softly, "but I do not want anyone to help me because they feel sorry for me." Those words stayed with Ethan. He realized immediately that Olivia was not waiting for someone powerful to save her. She was not searching for sympathy. She only wanted honesty and fairness. Ethan respected her even more because of that. He explained that his reason for finding her was not pity. It was gratitude. He told her about the moment she had helped someone important to him and how she had treated that person with the same care she gave everyone else. Olivia barely remembered the moment because to her, it was simply what a nurse was supposed to do. But to Ethan, it represented something much greater. It represented compassion in a world where people often forgot about it. As they continued talking, Ethan realized that Olivia was exactly the kind of person he rarely encountered. She had every reason to become bitter, yet she remained kind. She had every reason to demand attention, yet she stayed humble. Before leaving, Ethan told her that he believed the truth would eventually be recognized. Olivia smiled and thanked him, but she reminded him of something important. The right thing is still the right thing, even when nobody notices. Ethan carried those words with him as he walked away. For the first time in years, a powerful man who had influenced many people found himself influenced by someone the world had overlooked. The conversation between Ethan Walker and Olivia Carter stayed with him long after he left her apartment. As he walked through the quiet streets of the city, Ethan found himself thinking about something he had almost forgotten. True strength was not always shown through influence, success, or the ability to control a situation. Sometimes, strength appeared in the people who continued doing what was right even when nobody rewarded them. Olivia had lost her position, but she had never lost herself. That was something Ethan respected deeply. The next day, Ethan returned to the hospital with a clear purpose. He did not arrive with anger or the intention of embarrassing anyone. He arrived because the truth deserved a place in the light. The hospital staff noticed immediately that something was different. Ethan's presence always created attention, but this time, people were not focused only on who he was. They were focused on why he had come back. The administrator greeted him carefully, knowing that the situation surrounding Olivia was no longer something that could be ignored. Ethan calmly asked for everyone involved in the decision to be present. He wanted the complete story, not rumors or incomplete explanations. When the meeting began, the room remained quiet. Ethan placed the information he had gathered on the table and explained that Olivia Carter had been one of the most dedicated nurses the hospital had ever employed. He described her commitment, her patience, and the countless moments when she placed the needs of patients before her own convenience. The people in the room listened because they knew every word was true. Then Ethan asked a simple question. Why was someone like that allowed to leave? Nobody answered immediately. The silence revealed more than words could. Slowly, the details became clear. Olivia had not been removed because she lacked ability. She had not failed in her responsibilities. She had been pushed aside because she questioned choices that did not align with her values. She had respectfully spoken when she believed patients needed better care. She had protected the principles that made her a great nurse. The truth was uncomfortable because it forced everyone to admit they had ignored the wrong person. Meanwhile, Olivia continued her day without knowing what Ethan was doing. She had already started looking for new opportunities. She was not waiting for someone to restore her old position. She believed that every ending could become the beginning of something new. That quiet confidence was exactly what made Ethan admire her. When he finally called her and explained what was happening, Olivia did not celebrate. She simply asked if the patients were being treated fairly now. Ethan smiled when he heard her response because it confirmed everything he already knew about her. She was never focused only on herself. Even after being treated unfairly, her first thought was about others. Later that evening, Ethan visited Olivia again. He told her that the hospital had begun reviewing the situation and that people were finally acknowledging the mistake. Olivia listened quietly. She appreciated the effort, but she also reminded him that the most important thing was not her job. It was making sure people understood the value of compassion. Ethan looked at her and realized something that changed the way he saw the world. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted recognition. Olivia was different. She had spent years giving kindness without expecting anything in return. And that was why, in a world full of powerful names and impressive titles, the person who had been overlooked became the one everyone needed to remember. The days following Ethan Walker's return to the hospital brought a quiet change that many people noticed but few could explain. The same halls that once felt ordinary now carried a different feeling. People began looking back at moments they had ignored. They remembered Olivia Carter walking through those corridors with a calm smile, always carrying herself with patience even during the busiest days. They remembered how she spoke kindly to nervous families, how she encouraged new employees, and how she treated every patient with the same respect regardless of their circumstances. For the first time, many people understood that Olivia's quiet nature had never meant she lacked confidence. It meant she had nothing to prove. Olivia returned to the hospital not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted to make sure the patients who depended on her continued receiving proper care. When she walked through the entrance again, some employees looked embarrassed. They knew they had judged her too quickly. They had seen a nurse who did not seek recognition and assumed she was easy to overlook. They never realized that the person they ignored was the one who represented the values they claimed to protect. Ethan watched from a distance as Olivia greeted everyone with the same kindness she had shown before. He noticed something that impressed him deeply. Even after everything that happened, she did not return with bitterness. She did not return demanding apologies. She simply returned ready to help. That moment reminded Ethan why Olivia was different from anyone he had met before. In his world, many people showed respect because of his position. They were careful with their words because they knew his influence. But Olivia had respected him before knowing anything about his reputation. She had treated him like an ordinary person when others would have treated him differently. That memory remained one of the reasons he valued her so much. Later that afternoon, Ethan and Olivia sat together in a quiet hospital garden. The noise of the building faded behind them, leaving only a peaceful moment between two people who saw the world differently. Ethan told her that many people were beginning to understand what they had failed to see. Olivia smiled and said she hoped they did not only remember her story. She hoped they remembered the importance of listening before judging. Ethan looked at her and realized that this was the reason she had such an impact on people. She never tried to make herself the center of attention. She simply reminded others what kindness looked like. Meanwhile, the hospital began making changes based on what they learned from Olivia's experience. Policies were reviewed, conversations were started, and people began paying closer attention to the voices that were often ignored. Olivia did not see these changes as a victory over anyone. She saw them as an opportunity to create a better environment for future patients and employees. Ethan admired that perspective. He had expected her to want recognition after everything she experienced, but she wanted improvement instead. As the evening lights filled the city, Ethan realized something important. He had spent years building a reputation that made people notice him. Olivia had spent years doing good things when nobody was watching. Yet somehow, she had created an impact far greater than any title could provide. And that was when Ethan understood that the person who had been overlooked was never the person without value. She was the person whose value had simply been waiting for the world to finally notice. The return of Olivia Carter to the hospital changed more than people expected. At the first, many believed the situation would simply return to normal after the truth was revealed. They thought the story would end with an apology and a correction. But what happened next showed everyone that Olivia's influence was much deeper than a single moment of recognition. She had never wanted attention. She had never wanted people to remember her because of a mistake made against her. What she wanted was for people to remember the importance of compassion. Each day, Olivia continued working with the same dedication she had always shown. She walked through the hospital halls with the same gentle expression, speaking with patients, supporting families, and encouraging her co-workers. The difference was that now people noticed. They saw the small things they had ignored before. They noticed how she took extra time to listen. They noticed how she treated everyone with patience. They noticed that her kindness was not something she performed for others. It was simply who she was. Ethan Walker watched these changes quietly. The world still knew him as a powerful Korean Mafia boss with influence and a reputation that made people pay attention. But around Olivia, he was different. He did not need to appear powerful. He did not need to prove anything. He was simply a man who had learned something important from someone others had overlooked. Before meeting Olivia, Ethan believed strength came from control, resources, and the ability to make people listen. His life had been built around making decisions quickly and protecting what mattered to him. But Olivia showed him another kind of strength. She showed him the strength of patience. The strength of kindness. The strength of choosing what was right even when nobody rewarded you. One evening, Ethan and Olivia sat together after a long day at the hospital. The city lights reflected through the windows, creating a quiet moment away from the noise of the world. Ethan told her that he admired the way she handled everything. He admitted that many people would have allowed disappointment to change them. Olivia simply smiled and said that holding on to anger would only take away the peace she worked so hard to protect. Ethan remembered those words because they represented everything he had learned from her. She did not forgive because she was weak. She forgave because she refused to let someone else's actions decide who she became. Meanwhile, the people who once ignored Olivia began sharing their own stories about her. Former patients spoke about the comfort she gave them during difficult moments. Employees remembered the times she helped without expecting anything in return. Slowly, the hospital community understood that Olivia's greatest achievement was never a position or a title. It was the number of lives she touched through simple acts of humanity. Ethan realized that his role in Olivia's story was not to rescue her. She had never needed rescuing. She had already been strong before he arrived. His role was simply to stand beside someone whose value existed long before the world recognized it. As the days passed, Ethan and Olivia continued moving forward, knowing that the most meaningful changes often begin quietly. The people who had once overlooked Olivia now understood the truth. The person who walked away from the hospital carrying a small bag had never lost her worth. She had only been waiting for the world to finally see it. Months later, the hospital looked different, but not because of the building, the equipment, or the people walking through its halls. It looked different because the way people saw one another had changed. The story of Olivia Carter had become a quiet reminder that every person carried value, even when the world failed to recognize it at first. Olivia never considered herself someone special. She continued doing what she had always done, caring for patients, supporting her co-workers, and offering kindness in moments when people needed it most. The difference was that now people understood the meaning behind those simple actions. They no longer saw her as just a nurse walking through the halls. They saw a woman whose compassion had influenced everyone around her. Ethan Walker noticed this change every time he visited the hospital. The man who was once known only for his power and influence had become someone who valued different things. His reputation as a Korean Mafia boss still followed him, but those closest to him noticed a change. He listened more. He considered different perspectives. He understood that respect was not something created by fear or status. It was created by the way a person treated others when nobody was watching. Olivia had taught him that without ever trying to teach him anything. One afternoon, Ethan watched Olivia speak with a young nurse who was struggling with confidence. She offered encouragement and reminded her that being a good caregiver was not about being perfect. It was about being present and sincere. Ethan smiled because he recognized the same kindness that had changed his own perspective. Olivia had a way of making people feel seen. She gave others the same respect she had always hoped to receive. The hospital eventually created new programs focused on listening to employees, supporting patients, and recognizing the importance of compassion in healthcare. Olivia did not ask for credit. She did not stand in front of crowds looking for praise. She simply continued helping people because that was who she was. When someone thanked her for inspiring change, she always gave the same answer. She said that everyone had the ability to make a difference through small choices made every day. Ethan admired that more than anything. He had spent years surrounded by people who wanted their achievements recognized. Olivia was different. She measured success by the lives she touched, not by the attention she received. One evening, Ethan and Olivia stood outside the hospital entrance, watching the city lights shine across the streets. It was the same place where Olivia had once walked away carrying her belongings after losing her job. But now, the feeling was completely different. She was no longer leaving behind a place that failed to appreciate her. She was standing in a place that finally understood her worth. Ethan looked at her and realized that the greatest lesson he had learned was not about power, influence, or control. It was about humility. A person did not become valuable because others finally noticed them. They became valuable because of who they had always been. Olivia had never needed a title, a position, or someone powerful beside her to prove her worth. She had carried her dignity with her from the beginning. And that was the truth everyone finally understood. The woman they once overlooked was the person who reminded them what kindness, courage, and humanity truly looked like. The world did not change because a powerful man arrived. It changed because a humble woman never stopped being herself.